Any questions?
Can you explain a little more how would this money be distributed? You mentioned through grants. How does one community or one school get it over another?
Thanks for the question, Jim. I think our idea is that we want to make sure that there is a merit process in place so that schools can come forward and demonstrate their needs and what they're going to use with the funds. Obviously, we appreciate and understand that it is tough times fiscally for the state and for local communities, and so we want to make sure that we're able to stretch every dollar as far as possible. And so I think we are interested in working with Republicans in the legislature and coming up with a process that would award these grants to the most meritorious applicants.
Who would do the awarding? You haven't figured that out yet, that where this is going to be set? Is it going to be set up in the Department of Education, Department of the Budget Office, or where?
The plan right now would be to put it under the Office of Budget Management. We would ask that rules be promulgated to implement the concepts that Representative Carney has just laid out. This is something we can work with the governor on. And we are constantly looking for things that we can work together on. There's been many calls for bipartisanship. I think this is an area where we can truly come together and come up with a plan that makes sense for the people of Ohio.
Are you all prepared to introduce a bill to create a severance tax? Because at this point, the understanding is there is no bill for that, and there's no bill for the income tax cut. So
we are prepared to introduce a bill that will create the Kids and Communities First Fund. Part of that fund would be revenue from the tax that the governor has proposed.
Well, so that bill would create that tax.
It would either create it or it would draw revenue from a separate bill that the Republicans, that the governor has introduced, and the Republicans say they're moving through committee. We'll see.
But the tax isn't in the bill right now.
Right, so we are prepared to offer an amendment to the MBR that would, in fact, authorize these dollars. So what I've outlined to you, the $265 million from surplus revenue and tax receipts over estimates, the $120 million from the rainy day fund, the $15 million from the proposed severance tax, that will be in conjunction with an amendment that we're offering to House Bill 427.
Backers of the collective bargaining changes that the voters repealed said last year, they warned that cities and schools would be in tight financial situation if the voters repealed it. And under your urging, the voters repealed it. Did you respond to that thought?
Yeah, certainly. We had a number of mayors come in front of the Finance Committee. I asked those mayors what sort of budget shortfalls they were facing. Many of them said $1 million, $2 million or more. We asked them, okay, well, let's assume that Senate Bill 5 does become the law. How much money are you going to be able to save in your local community as a result? And most of them responded $10,000, $20,000. So if you're facing a $2 million hole and the tool is going to save you $10,000 or $20,000, that does not seem to be a very good tool to resolve the financial exigencies that these communities are facing.
I would add to that with regard to schools. When we were working on the budget bill in the last year, there were significant cuts to schools that came through both the state cuts and the more rapid elimination of tangible personal property tax. And the discussion then was that there would be savings through these various tools, including the pension shift. But that bill only established a study of the pension shift. So there have been a number of vague references to tools that may be available when we're looking at real cuts and real dollars right now. And there were not satisfactory answers on how schools are supposed to cope with those resources. And in fact, the governor's education advisor at the time said that it might be acceptable if we ended up with classrooms that had 50 students in them.
Furthermore, I would just say that let's keep in mind the way that a previous governor dealt with some of the budget problems we had and with public unions. There was a request for furlough days that a number of state employees were not very happy about, And Ted Strickland worked with those public employees and said, we're facing tough times. We appreciate what you do. We empathize that one of the most important things is to try to keep you in your home, enable you to send your kids to school. We want to do that, but at the same time, we need you to be willing to make some sacrifices. And public employees responded by saying, we're willing to do that, Governor. Unfortunately, the approach from this governor has been to walk in the room and say, get on the bus or get run over by the bus. And again, we're here to try to work with the Republicans in the legislature, to try to work with our colleagues that are providing safety forces who are teaching our children. We respect and admire what they do. And frankly, we need to figure out how we get through these tough budget times with them, not without them.
Good morning, my name is Jay McDonald. I'm president of the FOP of Ohio. A couple things that I heard here today I think you need to take back with you. One is the rainy day fund is growing and it's raining in local communities. In places like Uricksville, Tuscarawas County, having the debate whether to eliminate their police department or not. Places like Hamilton County, townships have had their police patrols cut from the Hamilton County Sheriff because the sheriff's budget has been cut by $4 million. Most of you know I'm a Marion police officer. And on January the 1st of this year, 15 of my colleagues were given pink slips, mostly due to cuts in local government funding. The Marion County Sheriff's Office went from 25 deputies to 11. Next year, my city says that between the estate tax and the further cuts in local government, $720,000 more are going to be lost. It will take $42 million in new payroll to make up that tax. Senate Bill 5 doesn't fix any of those problems. The tools that are needed to provide safe communities is the restoration of local government funds. Just this week, a report was released that police officers are dying at an increased rate, being murdered in the line of duty in increased numbers. The best officer safety tool that you can have is a partner. And my colleagues across the state are going out to work every day without that partner because of the loss of local government funds. Calls from citizens are not being answered because of cuts in local government funds. This proposal today does not raise a tax on an Ohioan. As I stand here and understand it, doesn't raise one tax on an individual taxpayer. All we're asking is that the promises that have been made since the 1930s be fulfilled. And the money that had been promised to be restored to local governments since the 1930s, that covenant is lived up to. And I'll be available to answer any questions afterwards.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, sir.
Do you expect any FOP members to appear in ads for Democrats making the case that local government cuts are jeopardizing public safety?
What I expect is that the restoration of local government funding is not a Republican or a Democrat issue, it's a community safety issue. And this isn't about elections. This is about what's doing right for local communities. And what is right for local communities is to restore the funds. We understand that there were cuts that had to be made because of the shortfall in the funding. But that need for those cuts, as we've heard here today, is evaporating. The state has $500 million in excess funds that they can use to restore that funding. What we, as 25,000 active and retired law enforcement officers across this state, are asking of the governor and this legislature is let's make our communities safer. And this is the way to do it.